And the reason for that is that SAE is the leading private university, not only in the UAE, but globally with regards to providing qualifications for students that want to do a bachelor's degree or even postgraduate qualifications in the creative media industry. And that is why this conversation with regards to how we can really guide our creatively talented students towards opportunities in the creative media industry is very important to us. We find that the focus when it comes to career opportunities for students, especially in this region, is sometimes focused on the more general and the more well-known careers. However, when it comes to the creative media industries, it's sometimes seen as a hobby and not really as a career. And I'm here to tell you all this morning that we are on a mission to change that perspective. Currently, within the UAE and within the GCC region, there are huge developments happening in the creative media industries, and massive investments are being made from government and from private business in order to develop the creative media industry in this region. And we'll share some of that with you as we go through the presentation. So we are partnering not only with our schools, but also with the government agencies in the UAE in order to play a role in making sure that students that are creatively talented are given the opportunity to be guided towards these career opportunities that would be growing so massively within the next couple of years. So that's what we are going to be focusing on. We have two great speakers that would be talking about this. First of all, we're going to be talking a little bit about design thinking and the process of design thinking, and that will be done by Vishal, and I think he will take the opportunity to just introduce himself as well, and why we thought that he would be a great person to talk to you about this. You will notice immediately when Vishal activates his camera that he's a young entrepreneur in the UAE. And that's actually the reason why we wanted to have an engagement with him specifically, because he is a specialist in the work that he does with understanding and working with Gen Z students. And he has huge experience in that field, and we want to tap into that. We're also going to try and make this presentation quite interactive, so at certain opportunities you will be given to give feedback, and also we're going to have some prizes that we will do a lucky draw during the course of the presentation, where one of our attendees will be given the opportunity to attend any of the SAE short courses for free, and we also will be giving each and every attendee from every school a discount on any of our short courses that you or anybody from your school can use if you want to use that as personal development for yourself or for your school. So some exciting things to happen over the next hour or so. I'm going to hand you over to Vishal, who's going to start with the first part of the presentation, and we are looking forward to an engaging session, and then we will take it as we go along. Thank you so much for everybody that have taken the time to join us this morning, and we are looking forward to engaging with you. Over to you, Vishal.
Thank you so much, Jan. Super excited to be here. And when I heard about the prizes, I was keen to see if I could take part in it as well. But thanks to all of you for joining. And as Jan mentioned, we know how difficult and stressful these times are. As much as 2020 is left behind, the aftermath of it is still happening. I come from an education, based family. So my mom's in the education field herself. So I can see the stress, that every one of you is going through live, first-hand experience with it at home. And I thank you for your time today. And like Jan said, it's going to be quite interesting, some of the topics we're going to cover, and it's especially going to be interesting for me because, as Jan mentioned, I'm used to delivering workshops and training programs for Gen Z, for school, high school students, university students, graduates, interns. And not to say that I haven't done workshops before for the older gen. Not calling you guys old, but but it's going to be really, really interesting for me, and it's a very it's a topic that I'm very passionate about, and you will see why. And I'm going to obviously run you through every aspect of it. We're going to make it interactive. I would definitely want you all to pitch in and take part in this. Keep it, a two-way conversation. And yeah, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. So just quickly share it. Hope you all have your morning coffees ready, and let's kick on. So, a big thank you to SAE EdOrbis for having us today. So, I'm just going to begin by giving you a quick intro on who I am, what I do, and then we're going to get into the session itself. So, the professional side of me, I am currently the founder and managing partner of Fireflies. So, we are a Gen Z focused brand that focuses on two different divisions. So that's in marketing and training and workshops. So my experience over the past 4 to 5 years have revolved around startups, marketing and events, impact and training. So from the Gen Z marketing standpoint, we work with a lot of global brands to conceptualize and execute campaigns to engage the youth. So we have the privilege of working with a lot of big brands like Bath and Body Works, Logitech, Yamaha. We're talking to Pepsi, Pizza Hut. And from a strategic standpoint, our focus is how do we future-proof their comms in order to appeal to this gen who not only have a huge spending power, especially in this region, but also from the fact that they have such a huge influence on the decision making in within families. So I'm sure all of you, if you have kids, you'd know that if you're deciding where to shift your house to, which car to buy, or even having dinner, where to order dinner from that day. Gen Z has a huge role to play in terms of making those decisions within the family. So it's important for brands to start targeting them. And being Gen Z ourselves, we consider ourselves as experts on how to execute this in the best way possible. But on the other hand, we also have a training division where we work closely with a lot of schools. I'm a GEMS alumni myself, so we work with a lot of GEM schools, a few Talim schools, on how we can better prepare the students for this upcoming wave of this upcoming couple of years, which it's going to be quite different, as we're going to see today as well, with the impact that COVID has had, and all the changes and expectations from brands and companies in terms of what kind of skills do the next generation need to have in order to be successful in any career that they choose. So we run innovation programs, workshops for a lot of schools and a lot of universities here, and that's been going on over the past 1 year. We've impacted over 2,000 students, even with COVID. So it's quite exciting. We've had the privilege of working with some really cool schools, and obviously because we come from Gen Z background, we are able to connect with students a lot better. I had the privilege of consulting for a lot of brands like Nike, Dell, and Oppo right after I graduated from university. I co-founded the first and only licensed youth organization, which is Step Up Dubai. So we were focused on developing and executing programs to help achieve the UN SDGs. This was back in 2016 to 2018. 2019. I stepped down from my role 2 years ago, and currently it's acquired by the UAE government. So that's a big win for us. And it's being run by Saima Khan, who is the president at the moment, and it's doing wonders. We were quite privileged to become the first and only licensed organization led by the youth in the UAE. And I also have a lot of experience in the startup space. So I ran a tech startup for about 2 years. We were the finalists for almost some of the biggest entrepreneurship competitions in the Middle East. So Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival. We were the finalists for a lot of the incubators in the world, which is 500 startups, Y Combinator, and we got a lot of attention from there. We worked with a couple of schools for the same, but eventually we pivoted to what we're doing today, given COVID and given all the things that we're doing. So that's the professional side of me, but I also like to share the personal side of me, because you know what, life's not always about the professional. So I am a musician. I love I make a lot of original music. I put up a lot of covers. I'm a podcast host. So this is something that I started recently called the Multiply Show, where I interview a lot of cool people. I recently interviewed someone who worked with the World Wildlife Fund in the UAE, another one who runs the Smash Room in Dubai. So go check that out after this. Shamelessly promoting myself here. I love football and basketball. I am a Netflix addict, unfortunately, to my parents, and I have an unhealthy obsession with chocolate milk. I know they've not sponsored this, but if you all decide that you really enjoyed this workshop and you want to thank us, then you can send lactose chocolate milk to me. But and I'm touch wood grateful to have a lot of good friends and family. And given the current situation, that's all you can hope for. So that's the personal side. So let's dive right into it. This is who I am, and just so that we break the ice and get to know your speaker for the day. And an important point before we get into what we're going to speak about today, and I think this is just generally important in life as well, is that you have an open mind, because some of the topics that we cover and some of the things that we're going to discuss is quite new. And like Jan said, there's been a very close-minded approach, or with not stereotyping, but generally that's the approach we've seen, where when it comes to careers, there's been a lot of focus in this region on the few general sort of career spaces like STEM, or you have your business courses, you have medicine, you have law. But when it comes to the creative industry, there's a very few eyes looking at it and actually trying to understand what it's about. So from that perspective, from how we're going to use design thinking, which I'm sure many of you know what that's about, but how do you use that in your day-to-day activities as a career counselor, as someone who's shaping the lives of a lot of students? I think that's going to be quite interesting. But given that we're going to cover a lot of different sort of topics, have an open mind when we're discussing these things. And like Jan said, we want to keep it a two-way conversation. So feel free to chime in, give your thoughts on the chat. And, Chandni, who is with us as well, will be going through it. And once I finish and Ajay takes over, we'll also have a good discussion on, what we've covered today. So the topics for the session are that we're going to look at careers in the 21st century. COVID has happened. And like Jan said, from a very Gen Z perspective, because that's my experience, that's where I come from. What do Gen Z expect out of careers today? It's very different from the millennial generations, from Gen X and boomers and things like that. So we're going to look at careers and how it's going to be different from the 21st century, given that we've gone through a pandemic. We're going to look at the creative industry in particular. There's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation about this industry. We want to change that narrative. And it's particularly important for me as a Gen Z entrepreneur being in this space, that people know about this. And, SAE, with their background as well, is also on a mission to change that. So that's why this session is quite important to all of us here. And design thinking and its application. We're going to quickly look at what design thinking is, how it's being applied, and particularly we're going to look at how it's going to be applied in from a career counseling standpoint. So what I'm going to be looking at is from a macro view on how, from a Gen Z perspective, so how would your students benefit from this, and what are their expectations just generally from careers coming from that generation. And obviously Ajay, who's from EdOrbis, is going to go into the depth about how you can use it in consultative career counseling. So let's get right into it. So careers in the 21st century. Now, I want to do a quick, I've been talking for quite a bit right now, even though it's just begun. Let's do a quick, a poll, or, a conversation where within just like, less than 10 words, I want to know from all of you, how do you see careers changing in the 21st century now that the pandemic has happened? Do you have any thoughts about the kind of questions your students are asking? So I'm just going to shift my screen and let's take it to the chat for like a minute or two. Why don't you all share about what's happening right now? What are your thoughts on, now that we've gone through a pandemic? What are the changes that you expect to happen? What are the questions that your students are asking? If the participants can just put it on the chat, I'd love to read some of it out so that we can have some two-way conversation. And feel free to chime in any thoughts that you have in this space. So I'm going to be on the chat. I'm going to expect answers. No, it's really funny that the roles are reversed now, because when I was in school, teachers always expected answers from us. Now I'm going to expect answers from you guys. So let's see some of the responses that we're going to get. I'm on the chat box right now. Would love to hear some inputs that you have. If you have those, any kind of inputs there. Within a sentence. Okay, perfect. Let's actually have Rowan go in. Yes, please go on.
Hi, yeah, thanks for letting me speak, Vishal. So just picking up on your point here, I think one of the biggest issues that I see with our students at the moment is they're totally confused. If I'm honest, they come from, certainly in the Middle East, it may not be so prominent in Western countries, but certainly in the Middle East, they come from, and you picked up on it, a background where there are kind of 5 jobs that are worth considering, which is engineering, science, you know, the STEMs, mathematics, medicine, etc., etc. And really, you know, and I feel that Dubai is trying to break this mold, but we have, our students are now looking forward into the future and thinking, well, I've always thought I would be this, but I don't even know what that's going to look like in 5 years, 10 years. If I'm going to invest in 4 years of training, and much of what, you know, at university or wherever, and much of what I'm going to learn will be totally out of date. So they're sitting there thinking, well, I don't know what a doctor looks like anymore. I don't know what an engineer will do. What are the technologies? And the answer is that, well, there probably isn't an answer. It is the actual answer. Who really knows? But it's that concern, that worry, that confusion about trying to find some direction in a world where we're now starting to say, well, you could go any which way you like.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. And I think with that, it also comes with a lot of adaptation to whatever's just going to spring up, because I think that's what COVID has seen. I think Kevin also shared that, you know, students are seeing the world go virtual. They want to have a virtual career that incorporates tech and data. Yes, very great point. Students concerning regarding the international examinations. Okay, yeah, there's been a lot of disruption from, I think, the exam standpoints, entrance exams and things like that. Students and parents are concerned about the future. Parents don't want to send their children far away for studies. Yes, given so many disruptions with travel, I think that's definitely going to see. Jan, yes, please go ahead. You wanted to say something.
Yes, I wanted to pick up on the point that Kevin had made with regards to students seeing the world go virtual. And I think this is probably the one lasting impact that we will all experience once the whole COVID thing comes to an end, is that the world of work has completely changed. You know, we will never have a situation again where people will work 100% from offices only. And what is quite interesting is that during the COVID situation, the group of people that have been able to adapt the best to remote working has been the creative industries, because they have been doing that to a great degree even before COVID. A designer can work from anywhere in the world. A game designer can write code for a game from anywhere in the world. An animator can write an animation and do an animation from anywhere in the world, because it's all online. And this big change has now become the norm. And we have found that when you're looking for a career that is really very robust and resilient against something like a pandemic, the creative careers is definitely one of those. So that's just the point that I wanted to make.
Perfect. Yes, I think we've got some really good points, and that's what I'm going to just expand on. You know, thanks, Rowan, thanks, Jan, for putting your points, and everyone else who did so. We're definitely seeing a lot of disruption, and that's causing a lot of anxiety and a lot of confusion just amongst not just students, like some of you said, even for the parents. They're just really confused on what's the next few years going to look like, what's going to be in demand, and, you know, how do I choose something that, you know, might not be relevant in a couple of years. So, but as Jan mentioned, I think the creative industry is going to be quite interesting, and that's what we're going to look at next. But before we begin on, specific things that I'm going to talk about within the how the career landscape looks like right now, I want to just quickly touch upon my career journey as an entrepreneur. And I was quite entrepreneurial in nature right from high school. So I've been working since I was 15, and I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of global brands, even at that age, with all the opportunities that my school provided me at that time. And I was not a big, I didn't have a lot of fans in school from the teacher perspective, because I was always outside my classrooms going for competitions, extracurriculars, and usually that student is not popular amongst teachers, and I think some counselors might agree. But I was on a mission to find out what I enjoyed doing, because I think there's a huge something that's missing, I feel, with a lot of schools and and just with the society as a whole in this part of the world, is this keen this pushing the students to explore beyond just what's happening within their classrooms, to see, okay, what does the real world look like? What are you going to enjoy doing? Because work's going to take up about 8 to 10 hours of your day. So I was always, it was innate in me, and maybe owing to the school that I went to, the teachers I've had the privilege of having, even my parents to a large degree, they've always been pushing me to go and explore and find out what I love doing. And because the reason that I'm saying this is, one of the biggest shifts we're going to see in the 21st century, and that has to happen, is encouraging students to explore and see what they're passionate about, what are their interests. And that feeds in well to what Jan's speaking about as well, because there are a lot of creative students out there, but there is this conception that can only be seen as a hobby. But what we're going to see now, when I get into the creative industry sector, is that it's quite practical to pursue those passions as an actual job, as an actual career, because there's a huge requirement for it. The industry is looking very very, very good. And it's quite interesting that you mentioned, Rowan, how is it going to look like in a couple of years? That's exactly what this presentation is going to look at as well. Like 4 to 5 years down the line, what is the industry going to look like? And the growth rates, what we're seeing from the data is quite promising. So what I'm going to tell you, or what I should say, is that I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis on choosing careers based on interest and passion, particularly because when these students go through tough times, or because every career is going to have a tough period. It's going to have, especially if you want to grow in the industry, unless you're going to enjoy what you do, you're not going to find a way to get through those tough times. Because being an entrepreneur in Dubai is difficult on its own. Running a company is not easy, but add COVID into that mix, and it's become a lot more harder. But I've not stopped pursuing it, because that's what I enjoy, and I don't mind having some of these roadblocks come in the way. Now, that's the same thing that if you look at, if students don't enjoy what they do, they're not going to find ways to figure out those issues, go through those roadblocks, and then come out the other side. Because if you don't enjoy it, you're just going to look at it as a task. So I think the first step is to encourage students, or we're going to see innately a lot of students really questioning, if I'm picking a career, do I really enjoy doing it? Because I think from a very deep sense as well, we've realized how life is quite short. And we're seeing a lot of students, even their seniors as well, people who have graduated, maybe alumni, especially me, when I saw a lot of my seniors picking careers that they don't enjoy, and then having to stop midway, or they have good jobs, but at the end of it, they're not quite excited about waking up in the morning and going for their job. I didn't want to be in that position, and I don't think as counselors or as people from the education industry, we want that for any of our students. We want them to enjoy waking up and going to their job. So that is going to be a very, very key factor in the 21st century. COVID has obviously made a lot of key changes on how things are going to work. Like Jan said, we're going to see work from home being a very normal thing. We've seen a lot of big brands already saying that you can work from home indefinitely. Brands like Twitter, Facebook, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of brands are also experimenting with 4-day work periods. If you notice, Microsoft, I think, if I'm not wrong, experimented with a 4-day work week in Hong Kong, and it ended up boosting productivity by I think 15 to 20%. And you're going to see a lot of that as well, that this notion of having to work 6 to 7 days a week is going to change from being more productive with a fewer days in the week. That's also going to change. We're also going to see a decentralized sort of workspaces where maybe people will just come together once a week to have their weekly meetings, and then work from the comfort of their homes, or from cafes, or especially from the creative industry standpoint. We're going to see a lot of remote projects happening, collaborative projects happening as well. And everything, like a lot of some of you mentioned, it's gone digital, and digital skills are going to be a huge thing as well. Having the know-how on how to work remotely, how to successfully manage projects from across different time zones, through Zoom, through platforms like Google Meet, is going to be very key. People need to know the cues around it, the latest trends around that as well. We're also going to look at a focus on the skills. So this is from a source of the World Economic Forum from 2020, who listed top 15 skills for 2025, given that the pandemic has happened. And you can notice it here, and obviously we're going to share this presentation with you, and you can have a look at it even after this. Some of the key things that I'd like to highlight is active learning and learning strategies, which works really well for the creative industry as well, because you learn by doing. And I think students who are able to quickly learn and adapt to this situation is going to be quite important. And that goes back to what someone said in the chat on being adaptive in this very confusing stage that we're going through, picking up the new skills that will be required as well. Learning about the new platforms and trending platforms is going to be very key. From a marketing standpoint, what I can tell you is, I'm not sure if a lot of you know about TikTok, but TikTok has exploded over the past 1 year. And brands have had to adapt to it, because that's where all the eyes are. And those kind of big platforms and apps are going to come up very quickly, and having the know-how on how to manage those changes is going to be very, very key. You can see creativity, originality, and initiative being some of the top skills, and all of these are quite resonates with what SAE does as well, because active learning is quite important. And they have a lot of industry partners they work with, as they conduct a lot of their courses, and technology, design, and programming is there. You also seeing problem solving and ideation being a key aspect of it, which again we'll be seeing in this presentation as well. And one thing that I'm definitely going to see is what we're going to definitely see is how will entertainment define this decade? Because we've all been on lockdown, and I think we had it a little better compared to some of the other countries, touchwood, on when we were stuck at home at this work from home situation. Unless we had things like Netflix or music or any of those platforms, I think we would have all gone crazy. In fact, I actually want to do a quick poll or a questionnaire right now. In one word, can I have the audience say, what your work from home experience or your lockdown would have been like if we did not have Netflix, or we did not have Spotify or music, if we did not have entertainment? What would your work from home or your experience at home been like? In just one word, I just want to see what your thoughts are on that. Hell, yeah, definitely. Come on, I just want to see a couple of words. Chandni, and feel free to chime in as well. Yeah, it's going to be a nightmare. I mean, I can't imagine not having Netflix even without COVID. So imagine, being at home, not having that kind of entertainment. Just imagine, in one word, not having any entertainment at all that we have. Yeah, if anyone else wants to chime in. Lonely, okay, that's gonna be that's something. Stressed, yeah, for sure. And I think, again, what you're noticing all these words is going to be quite it is difficult, and I think there's been a lot more appreciation for the creative industry right now, when, as an industry, and as a person who've been quite creative and who have admired the arts and music and things like that. There's always been that sort of notion in the society, and especially in this part of the world, where it's only being seen as a hobby, that we're only seeing the trends in the West, and it's not something that you can practically pursue, or it's not a worthy cause to pursue. That's some of the conceptions that people have. But what you would notice is that this situation, COVID, has shown that without it, life, there's no point in living in a certain sense, because that's what gives me art and music, and the creative industry gives a lot of meaning to people's lives. And a lot of the words that you've used to describe a world without these verticals is, it's pretty bad. So moving back to the presentation, yeah, I just, we want to keep it interactive, so feel free to chime in. And we have Chandni and everyone looking at the chat, so any inputs that you want to give will be much appreciated. So that really sets in. So now we've seen what the industry looks like and what the industry is going to look like. Let's look at the creative industry in particular in a silo. I want to start off with a very cool quote from the movie Dead Poets Society. It's a very old movie. I've personally not watched it, but this particular quote resonates with me quite well, which says that medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, and love, these are what we stay alive for. And we've seen this now with the simple experiment that I did, that life would have been boring hell. It would have been very difficult if we did not have art to fall back on. And I think that's definitely raised our appreciation for this field and for the people involved in this field as well. And you would notice that with this industry. So that's what we're going to look at now. What does the creative industry look like? We're going to look at 5 different verticals within the creative industry that also quite resonates well with what SAE does, the courses that they offer, and the stats. And the stats speak for themselves at the end of the day. The facts about these industry. We're going to look at some of the misconception and misinformation around it. Now, before we do that, I want to do a quick story on a friend of mine called Kevin. So Kevin was, I went to high school with Kevin. He was just like me. We were quite entrepreneurial in nature. We loved being outside classrooms. Teachers hated us for that one fact. He was very much into design. He loved designing things, anything to do with design, which is posters for the events that our school hosted. We were a part of the Formula One in schools competition. Kevin was one of the best, if not in the school, in the country at that time at what he did. But obviously, given that fact, he had no interest in some of the subjects that he was pursuing. Like, he was majoring in physics, chemistry, biology at that time. And obviously, he was failing all of his exams. He wasn't doing well for himself. And a lot of a lot of my friends, especially, even the teachers to a large extent, did not see a lot of hope for him, because Kevin ended up failing his 12th grade, which in our society is that if you fail 12th grade, that's the end of your life, and that's all there is to it. And he had to go back to India to complete that 1 year and come back and see what he can do in Dubai. Now let's fast forward 5 years down the line. Right now, Kevin actually has his own startup called Arcub, which is a mobility startup in the UAE. It's being recognized by RTA. They partnered up with RTA. They've won a lot of global competitions. They actually won a competition by Volkswagen 2 years ago. They're funding from almost a lot of venture capitalists in the region, from South Africa, from UAE. Their pilot projects happened about a year ago. Obviously, COVID has had an impact on them, but there's no signs of it slowing down or stopping down. And he's doing so well for himself. And interestingly enough, Kevin is also an SAE student. So he joined SAE right after his difficult time in high school. He pursued design, an industry that a lot of his teachers were skeptical about and thought that there was no opportunity for. And now we're seeing Kevin 4 years or 5 years down the line doing so well for himself, pursuing something in the design industry itself. So he was the one who designed the app. He was involved in the creative element of the entire startup, and obviously a huge reason for the success of that startup was because of what the role Kevin had to play. So this is a live example of a student here right now, and we're going to hear from another student as well after this on pursuing something in the career in this space can be productive, can be practical, and can be amazing for the student. For someone who was not recognized or not given a lot of attention back in high school, he is doing well for himself just because he had that passion to pursue something in this field. And let's address the stigma. Like why a quick question on why does my dad have BP right now? Because my brother wants to be a footballer. There's a lot of stigma around industries that are not that's not very common or not heard of. So when your students come and tell you that, hey, I want to be a musician, or I want to get into the music industry, I want to animate films, I want to get into filming, I want to act, I want to direct movies. When these sort of statements come from students to either their parents, or maybe a lot of some teachers as well, some people in the education industry, the first feeling that they have is apprehensions, like, oh my god, this is not a industry that you want to get into. This is not something, you need to have a focus point, which might be in STEM or business, and this could be something that you pursue on the side, and maybe you can, if that doesn't work, then you have something to fall back on. That's something that all parents like to use, and for a long time my parents did, but obviously, touch wood, they've changed their mind and they've seen the potential of pursuing something that is very, very practical at this stage. So the truth about the industry is that this is a very practical industry, and the reason for it is that and why a lot of people are skeptical about it is because there's a lack of information about this industry. People are not able to understand the fact that there are a lot of job opportunities out there in this space. In the 5 verticals that we're going to see, there is a lot of growth in this industry. So not just now, as Rowan said, 5 years down the line, when your current high school batch graduates from finishing their undergraduate program, what is the industry going to look like then? We have stats to show you that it is quite positive, and it's just going to grow despite it being so great right now. And there's misinformation. Like I said, a lot of people think that it's not practical, and it's only going to work in countries like the West, in Europe, in the US. But you're going to see the stats show that it is quite growing in this part of the world as well, in Asia, in India, in Middle East, especially in the UAE particularly. So you don't have to, even if parents are quite skeptical about sending their students somewhere else, there are a lot of opportunities right here in this country, in this city, on investments in this field as well, which shows that this is a field worthy enough to pursue if that is something that the students want to do. And like I said, the truth about Gen Z is that they do want to pursue more. There might be a lot of creative students out there, but they're just skeptical or worried about pursuing it with what their parents might say, with this is what the society might say, or they might also be confused on the fact that I like this, but there might be no practical job opportunities for me out there once I'm done with this. But that's what we want to change, and this is how we wanted to address the stigma. So let's look at the 5 verticals, right? And one of the biggest verticals in this. So we're going to look at gaming, animation, film. We're going to look at design, and we're going to look at these 5 verticals. And within gaming itself, which is the biggest one of them all, which I'm sure a lot of, if you have kids who are into gaming, you might be very stressed out about this space. It is valued right now globally at $159 billion. Now, what we're going to look at, all the stats that we have here, and what we're going to share a resource sheet with you as well, is going to look at it from a global perspective, and then also from a GCC and a UAE perspective. So the growth rates and all the stats that you see is not just skewed towards the West. It is stats originating from this part of the world as well. And what you'll also notice is that a quick example that I can give is the investment that the Saudi Arabian government is putting into esports right now. And you would assume, given the space that we're in, Middle East, culturally how it is, you would assume that they would be quite restrictive when it comes to these industries. But they themselves, Saudi Arabia, with its culture, with the way that it is, they themselves are recognizing the power about this industry, and they're investing in it. We've seen a rise in the number of gamers. There's 100 million GCC gamers in GCC alone. That should tell you how big the industry is, the demand for new games, the demand for esports in general. And if you take an example of within the country as well, Abu Dhabi recently invested in a hub for gaming, where they're pushing out a lot of money in terms of the opportunities that they have. They want the private sector to be involved. They want students in schools to be involved in terms of I think, yes, Chani, you had is it visible to everybody? Is it all fine? I just got a missed call. Oh, it's not visible?
No, we lost the presentation, Vishal.
Oh, you did? Okay. 1 second, hold on. Let me just present it again. I think another big part of adaptation has been, technical glitches in COVID. Is it fine now? Can everybody see it? And please let me know through to your sound? Because I'm not able to see the chat right now.
Yes, it's working.
Awesome. So sorry about that, everyone. So yeah, like I was saying, there's a lot of investment within the country as well. This is a great example of, Abu Dhabi Gaming, a hub in Yas Marina, where they're building an esports ecosystem. And within gaming, the best part about this is the ripple effect that it has on the other verticals within the creative industry. Now, esports events before COVID were, and now even with the new rules, they're running events that are quite big and massive. You're seeing events inviting over, 50 to 60,000 people, not just, again, in the West, but here within this region as well. And how that affects the other verticals in the creative industry is that you need people to film these events. You need people to go live now that it's COVID from here with, people watching it from across the globe. You have millions and millions of people going live to watch these esports events as well. You need people from the design industry to design the space for these events. You look at how beautiful and creative the space is. You need people to do that. You need animators to come up with ads for these space. So just one event in the esports industry is going to have such a huge impact on the other verticals as well. It's going to have more opportunities for them. So gaming is a massive industry on its own, and the investments that, not just from other places, but within the region in Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, in UAE, the investment and the growth that it's going to see, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for gamers in the space, and not just, professional gaming. It's quite multifaceted. You would also see gamification being a thing. So, companies are now looking at how to gamify some of their HR processes, people, sales and marketing. So you would need people with those kind of skills and know-how to be a part of those industries as well. So like I said, it's quite multifaceted, and someone with this skill and know-how in the gaming industry is going to be quite relevant across all industries. You're seeing a lot of brands invest in marketing campaigns focused on gaming as well. You're seeing brands, like a quick example I can give you is, Pringles recently did an esports event with Fortnite, if I'm not wrong. And that just goes to show, even other industries in FMCG investing, they're looking at gamers to help them push their products as well. When you look at animation, you can see the stats here. It's a huge industry. It has a huge growth rate. This is a quote from the CEO of Spacetoon, which is a local-based channel here, that there is a huge demand for animation. There's a lot of parents and students really interested in that content, which is focused on entertainment and education. Now, even the animation is not just restricted to movies, but it's also in the space of advertisements. It's also in the space of e-learning. You're going to see a lot of online courses that's going to come up, and that's going to require the expertise of animators to step in and make it a lot more engaging. Because let's face it, getting the attention of people, not just students, but even people who are doing MBAs or who are doing training courses, if they're going to do remote courses or online courses, it has to be engaging. So you're going to need the skills of animators to make those engaging kind of content. And even with filmmaking, you would assume that with COVID, there's been a lot of disruptions. Movies are not going to see the light of day. A lot of the dates are being pushed off, but the industry has adapted quite quickly. They're seeing, they're going to see how to have big crews on set, maintaining social distancing. A lot of the big movies by Sony, by Universal Studios, by 20th Century Fox, it's all going ahead with their schedules, but just making sure to follow all the rules. And there's been a huge demand for it because we're locked at home. There's not a lot happening, so people need that kind of entertainment. So the demand for new titles, for new shows, for new movies has also increased, and it's globally becoming a huge industry. Filmmaking is becoming a big deal. Again, stressing on the multifaceted nature of it. You're not just going to see filmmakers in the film industry. It's also going to be seen in covering events, because events are now going to be remote. Maybe you can't have thousands of people, you can only have hundreds of people. So for the rest 900 who want to watch it from their home, you need the expertise of these people to go live from these events and showcase that that event in a great way. You're going to see filmmakers even in advertisements, because there's a lot more expectations from that. Because I come from that industry, there's a huge expectations from Gen Z, from millennials, to have more enticing content on the brand's pages. So you're not just going to see pictures anymore. You're not just going to see product focused posts. You're going to see a lot more of content from people behind the company. You're going to see the customers talking about it. So that expertise can only come from people who have a know-how on how to shoot creative content. So filmmaking is going to be huge. Design in itself is going to be huge. And what's great about all of this is you're going to see a lot of entrepreneurs coming out of this. I have a lot of friends who set up their own companies in this space who are doing very, very well for themselves in filmmaking, in design, because it's no longer, the expectations are quite high. You're not going to see companies put up mediocre content out there. If you want Gen Z or millennials to buy your products or to buy your services, you need to make sure your Instagram and TikTok are on point. They're going to judge you by their website. They're going to judge you by the kind of content that you put up on your Instagram, on all your social media pages. And for that, you need great designers. You need designers who have an eye for these things to create content that is going to appeal to the audience. And like any other industry, it is seeing a lot of growth and a lot of new trends coming up. So without so sorry, yeah, without those people who have an eye for these things, who are consistently looking at how, oh, again, is my presentation going off, everyone? I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. Just carry on.
Oh, it's fine. Okay, perfect. Right. So you're definitely going to see that growth, and you're going to see that space, and it's going to become quite interesting in the next 5 years as well. The same with audio. You're going to see a lot of these stats. Everything you've seen with every industry I've gone through is that there's always a growth that's going to happen, especially because of the situation. People are going to want more of quality content, every part of the verticals that we've looked at. So, and from a very practical standpoint, the first question a lot of, students have, or even parents have, is, what are the salaries that we can expect? And this is just at a glance, the income expectations of the 5 verticals that we've looked at within UAE itself. You can see within this region the kind of annual income that these these industries offer within the within different job titles as well. And what's interesting is that if you notice, a lot of these spaces, or the amounts that you see, are higher than most, the typical job opportunities that you see in STEM or in medicine or whatever it is. So again, all of these points quite importantly showcase that the creative industry is growing. We've seen it from a world versus Middle East versus UAE perspective. So the misconception that this is only growing in one part of the world and not in this region is quite wrong. It is happening quite well within Middle East and UAE. They are viable. It is practical. You've noticed the trends. You've seen the kind of opportunities that will spring up in each vertical. You've looked at the income expectations as well. And at the end of it, it's about Gen Z. At the end of it, these are the people that's going to take up our world, and they are the ones who are going to be, spending 10 to 12 hours a day of their life pursuing these, whatever job opportunities that they pick up. So it is quite important that we provide them with all this information, not just them, obviously the parents as well, to show them that if your student has an interest in this field, it is a practical option, and the stats are there to back it up. And the information that you've seen and the kind of jobs that you want, especially if you want more information of this, with this, SAE can definitely help you with the same. So we're going to definitely share this presentation with you, so you can access all these resources and more stats with more links that show a lot more information about this industry, which we've curated. So if you would like to share that with your students, with your parents, please feel free to do that, because again, our mission is to just change this completely. Now, we want to hear from one more story from an SAE student as well about this industry, about what she's doing. So I'm going to quickly pass it on to Leanne before I continue with my presentation. So Leanne, the floor is yours. You're going to hear her story of how, she's made it in this industry, and it's a live example again you're going to hear from. So Leanne, over to you.
Hello, thank you so much. Yes, so just give me a minute. I'll just be sharing my screen. Okay, let me know when you can see it.
You're good to go.
Yes, Leanne.
All right, so hi everyone. I'm Leanne Hadel Fernandez. I am an SAE alumni, just recently graduated. And right now I'm currently working as a 2D and 3D concept artist and storyboard artist. So just a little bit about me and my specialization at SAE. I studied animation, And although I initially wanted to specialize in the field of like character modeling and concept art, I ended up doing everything. Like I ended up learning a bit of everything. So I guess I graduated as a 3D generalist, which proved to be very beneficial, honestly. And so for my final project, which was my graduation project, I worked on my very own hybrid animation music video, which I will get to in a bit. But it kind of like encompasses all the aspects of my education here at SAE. And more importantly, it was for a very good cause, which was like towards the BLM movement. So yeah, it was a pretty fun experience. And yeah, so yeah, this is a picture of me as well. I play and paint my own violin. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. So when was I creatively inclined? Like, when did I know that, you know, this was for me? To be honest, I didn't really know that I was creatively inclined until like I grew up realizing I was always intrigued by anything that screamed art. You know, anything that had art around me, I was always intrigued by it, and I was always immersed in that kind of experience. It made me feel very alive, very connected in a way, you know. So yeah, I guess it was okay. I grew up knowing that everything around me that screamed art was my thing. However, I didn't really know that there was an industry that could allow me to, you know, express myself, but could also help me create a sustainable living out of it, you know. As we heard in the presentation today, that there's a lot of like stigma around it, but also a lot of misconception and misinformation about this industry. And that's why it was very hard for people like us growing up to be aware that, you know, an industry like this could actually exist and flourish. So for me, it was more like, okay, I could paint, I could sing, I could dance, I could also play instruments and stuff. Yeah, I was like a bit of everything. But at the end of the day, the most fundamental aspect of everything was that I wanted to express emotions through a story. So regardless of the medium at which I was intrigued by, it was the idea that I wanted to tell a story. Whatever manner in which I can express a message across, I would want to take that. And that's when I knew that, okay, this is what I want to do. So it's regardless of whether it's animation, film, design, games, this and that, I want to tell a story. And that's what and that's when I realized I was creatively inclined. However, starting off from primary and secondary school, I always found myself being able to write and direct my own short plays and skits, like for assemblies and gatherings and stuff like that. I was always like the first person to take the initiative and go like, okay, I got this cool ass idea. We need to like do this and that. And I had like a really cool idea of how to lay out the foundation of things, because I was always intrigued by how the film industry would be able to capture this in their basically in their content. I used to always be interested by the behind the scenes videos. So like if I'd watch something and I'd be really interested in it, I would always make an attempt to like look at how the making of the video was done. And that's how I got these ideas that helped me to generate my own ideas for my plays and scripts in primary and secondary school. However, by the end of high school, that was when like we had these university fairs and stuff, I was introduced to the creative media industry. And in particular, I wanted to be an art director for music videos. Now, the reason why I chose to be something very specific is because it kind of encompasses all my my passions and my interests all in one specific title, I guess, as an art director. Because I grew up painting, I grew up singing, I grew up like from a film background. I used to do photography and was always interested in film. So like I had that as part of my background. I was also into music. I did a couple of exams in music in violin and piano. So I had a bit of like musical background. And then of course I had my artistic direction in everything that I used to do. So I was like, I think the best way to like encompass all of this in one goal or in one title would be an art director, possibly for music videos. And I figured this out like towards the end of high school. So I guess that was when I was aware that I was creatively inclined. And so for my inspiration, what was I inspired by, and like what did I do about it? So although this might sound like a niche and probably unconventional, I was heavily inspired by the K-pop music industry. So I know like it's kind of like new and trendy, but more than anything, it was like when I was introduced to like the K-pop industry by a couple of my friends in school, I was like, wait, hold up, like this is it. Like, you know, this is the golden chest for me, because I was like, okay, it has everything. Their music videos are completely exceptional. They're insane. Their styling, their sets, their concepts are just beyond this world. They're actually beyond their own time. And knowing how COVID has kind of disrupted the way we work and stuff, we have to like look forward to how these technological advancements can help us with our work and progressively to like move forward. Yeah. So the K-pop industry was one that actually really implemented this very, very well. They're always like ahead of their time. And that was something that really intrigued me. It was something where I realized that, okay, as an animator, you can conceptualize ideas and can actually execute them. So you can actually make your fantasy a reality. You know, when I kept telling myself this specific phrase that, okay, I have the ability to make my fantasy a reality, it would always just, you know, excite me, because I'm like, I have that potential, I have the power, and I have discovered that not just like, it wasn't an instant click. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this out of nowhere, right? It was like, all throughout my life, I slowly learned to develop those skills and hone those skills, and to be able to understand that, okay, this is what I want and this is what I want to do, why I want to do it, because I want to tell the story, I want to convey that message, I want to convey those emotions through visuals and audio. That is something that can make people like just express things to people in a way that words cannot, you know. And again, through this whole COVID pandemic, we have learned to appreciate the increase in entertainment and the entertainment industry. We have learned to see the potential, like we discussed. If it wasn't for Netflix, for the entertainment industry in general, we would have all just been losing our minds during the lockdown. So now we're starting to realize that, okay, this is the thing that's picking up. And I'm so glad to have been part of this even before the pandemic. So even though in high school, I did the GCSE O-levels art course, I was like the only student who actually scored an A star with a 97% in my finals. And also surprisingly, I'm still like in shock that I got a 200 on 200 in my 3-year coursework. Like despite all of these accomplishments and stuff, I was like, wait, am I on the right direction? You know, I always doubted it. I was like, is this for me? Like every trimester at SAE, I was always questioning whether this is for me, whether it's going to be worth it. That fear of like graduating with a degree that probably costed a lot for my parents. But more than that, it was like, I know that this is what I want to do, but is it viable? Is it going to actually end up giving me a sustainable living from doing something I truly want to do? Like, okay, I might be good at everything that I do, but is it worth it? You know, those thoughts, they always like consume me during my education at SAE. But then that's when I was like, I would go back to the fundamental reason for why I started this in the first place. Like, it's a thing that you need to like, I would say it's a very essential aspect that you need to remind yourself of why you started this in the first place. And so by doing that, it really helped me. And yeah, with my family and friends. So at first, my family weren't as supportive of the fact that I'm doing something in the creative media industry. Again, I come from a brown family background, so that didn't make any of it easier. But yeah, my family, it took them a while to actually accept this, and they were probably only able to appreciate the entertainment industry during the pandemic, and they were able to see that, okay, the creative media industry was probably the only industry that's picking up or like being able to deal with this disruption in this new world that we are in post pandemic. And so they were like, okay, so I guess maybe she knew what she was going to do, and let's see how things go for her. But my friends and people at SAE, they all really helped me. They supported me since the very beginning. So like, thank you to them. And yeah, so just a short story time about my hero's journey at SAE. This is about how I hone my skills here. So I realized as I was pondering upon my journey at SAE that my very first project, my personal development project at SAE, was a music video, as well as my final graduation project, which also managed to get the best capstone project as an award for the virtual showcase. They both consisted of like being music videos. It's something that I wanted to do, being an art director in my own music videos, having the artistic direction towards the way I can conceptualize a story with music. And that's when I realized that, okay, I started off and ended off my journey at SAE by being an art director for my own music videos, which was completely insane because I never thought I would ever end up being in a place where I would be able to do the thing I've always wanted to do. And this was something that really, really struck out to me, especially giving me a good feeling to graduate with. So yeah, all I can say is that right now it's like working through like this passion over the last 3 years was nothing short of thrilling and tiring, but I guess it was all worth it at the end. Because to my astonishment, I was able to bag myself a full-time job as a concept artist and storyboard artist at my company called Crystal Corporation. And I was able to get that job in like less than a month of graduating, which to me is like a big, big surprise. I do feel like I earned up to it, so that makes me feel very good about it. And coincidentally, actually, today marks 1 month since I started working at this company, and it's been amazing. I've been getting my salary on time, and everything's just great for now. So all I can say is that when employers are looking out for new and fresh candidates, they always want to look for someone with an open mind, who's open to new ideas and solutions, and also who has like fresh ideas and fresh ways of thinking towards their approach to work. So therefore, in conclusion, I would just say that following your passion can actually lead to building a successful and sustainable career, regardless of what that dream or ambition is. So like, if you truly love it, you want to do anything and everything to actually bag yourself a career in it. And so with that, thank you. Thank you for listening to me.
Amazingly, and that was quite awesome. And everyone, the story or the reason why we were driving home this point about the creative industry and the stats that we looked at, and especially this particular story from Leanne as well, as a live example of how important this industry is, feeds into what we're going to talk about importantly in design thinking, because identifying a creative student like Leanne, giving her the opportunity and the platform and the support is going to be important, so that we have more success stories like Leanne, following her dreams and doing what she does in the best way possible. So, we have looked at how practical and how the potential for this industry. Now, how do we now use this cool concept of design thinking to identify these students, and how do we give them the platforms and opportunities to pursue this as a full-time job, as a full-time career? That's what we're going to look at. So for all of a lot of you might have been might have known what design thinking is. You've been exposed to it in other workshops. Maybe you might be using it in your school. It might be something that your schools are constantly talking about with your students as well. But what I think, to all those who are not very familiar with it, design thinking for me is just a fancy term for a creative way to solve problems. So it's not just used by corporates. I use it at home as well, very strategically to get things that I want from my parents. But let's go through, step by step on what design thinking is, just a quick introduction on it. The most important step before we get into the 5-step process is that do not assume. The reason why a lot of the times solutions for a lot of problems, or even from a counseling standpoint, I'm sure you all can relate to this, is that when we assume things about the person that we're trying to solve the problem for, things end up going wrong. Assumption is the reason why my mom was mad at my dad when they went on their first date, because my dad assumed she liked cats, but he didn't know that she has a phobia of cats. So a simple question, or listening to her, or asking her parents, or whoever it is, and does she like cats, would have been easiest way to know that that's not what he would have done. So assumption is the reason why my ex-girlfriend got mad at me because I invited someone to a party who wasn't supposed to be at that party. So never assume. And the way that it feeds in well to what I'm going to talk about, what we're going to talk about today is design thinking is a very people-focused process. You're looking at it from a perspective of the person you're trying to solve the problem for. So the first step is to empathize. Identify the stakeholders who you're trying to solve this issue for or the problem for, and recognize what are the touch points to engage with them. So are you going to talk to them through social media? Are you going to have stakeholders? You're going to talk to your stakeholders within your school? Are you going to talk to them face to face? So identifying who those people are, and B, how do you engage with them. And the whole point of this step is to collect data, seek to understand what they're going through, what are their difficulties, what are their pain points. That's the stage one. You recognize who they are and what are they going through. And it's very, very important not to lead the conversation at this stage in the way that you want to lead it. It's all about them, right, at the end of it. So don't ask to close-minded questions. Have it quite open-ended, so that you can get as much as data and as much as understanding as possible. Then once you've collected all this data from the person that you're trying to solve, the group of people you're trying to solve the problem for, you need to understand what's a common problem amongst all of them. Maybe out of the 9 out of the 10 people will tell you that this is a problem, A is a problem, or B is a problem. Once you've understood, from them, you've collected the data, you need to start defining what is the problem that you can realistically solve. And the challenge is, it could be 2 or 3 of them, but it could just be one. But you need to focus on realistically the few common problems that's affecting everybody. And then you ideate, you come up with potential solutions to solve this problem. What are some of the things that you can do? And this stage has to be collaborative. So it can't just be done in a silo. You can't come up with ideas on your own. It has to be, and ideally this stage is the most successful when you sit with your stakeholders together and come up with solutions, because they themselves might have really good ideas on how to solve the issue that they're going through. And you also need to understand how to build a prototype around it. So once, let's say you have 5 great ideas, out of the 5 great ideas, how do I use maybe 1 or 2 of them as an actual, build an actual prototype or a solution and execute that solution. And you need to be very aware about, the speed versus quality aspect of it. You might have a great solution that takes maybe 5 to 10 years to build, or you might have a mediocre solution that you can build within a week. So it's quite important to address the speed, because you don't want to wait so long to start solving these problems as well. And finally, you test it. Once you've built your prototype, you go and execute it out, and go back to the empathize stage and see how your solution is working. Are these stakeholders actually receptive to the solution? Is it actually solving the issue? Is it actually solving what you're there for? Those are the things you need to ask, and then you go through the entire process again. So this is simply put what design thinking is. And if if it's quite obvious that you can use this in any aspect of what you do. It could be used in in the corporate world. It could be used in second. Yeah, it could be used in the corporate world. It could be used in education. It's just provides a structure to solving problems. So let's take a quick example of Airbnb, right? How did Airbnb come through? Now, I'm not sure if many of you might know the app, many of you might not know the app. Airbnb is an app where you can book out in 2 segments. You can book out rooms or couches or things like that when you go to another country instead of hotels. So, or from person who's listing it, you can list out your extra room or extra bed or extra couch to someone who wants to use it for that 1 night or 2 nights or whatever. So it's basically decentralized the whole hotel industry. So how did actually Airbnb come up? And actually it can be really looked at from a design thinking perspective. The founders were in the city trying to book rooms for one of their conferences, one of the conferences that they're attending. And what they noticed was a lot of the people attending the conference could not book rooms in time. There were no hotels available. So they defined that problem to be that everything's fully booked. There's no space or room for people to actually, stay somewhere for that conference. So they started to think about, solutions to this one problem. What do we do? And, it's really funny, but one of the founders just emailed the other founder and said, hey, why don't we just turn, our room into a space that people can live at? We can just keep a mattress or keep a sleeping mat and give them a breakfast at the end of it. Why don't we turn our house into a bed and breakfast? That was, their idea. It was something that they can easily prototype and, put out there quickly. So what they did was create a simple website. They had their room with a mattress, and it took a photo of it, put it up in the website, and they actually had 2 or 3 guests come up because of that conference. So, and it's funny, from now what it is, what it was, which was just a simple concept, it's now about an $80 billion industry. And $80 billion startup, and it's doing quite well for themselves right now. And what you would notice, and really important aspect of design thinking is how it's a process that you need to keep using throughout different stages of whatever it is that you're doing. So after a bit, like let's say a month or two down the line, they were not able to increase. Airbnb was not able to increase their profits after $200. So they went back, put themselves in the shoes of their customers, and started to see why isn't it working? Why aren't people not using the app? And the major problem that they found out was that the pictures that people were listing in the app were very, very bad. So they started to ideate, okay, how do we solve this issue now? So what they decided was that they themselves would go and take pictures of, great quality pictures of the houses that were listed in their app, so that people would be more inclined to buy it. And instead of hiring, really professional photographers at that time, they just bought a camera themselves and went and, got that prototype in, and that tripled their profits within just 1 week of doing that one simple activity. So you see, it was not just coming up with the solution, but to make sure the solution sustains, they needed to apply design thinking. So that was just a quick example on how it's used in a corporate sense. Now let's look at from a career counseling standpoint, and a very Gen Z perspective. How do you use this stage to identify these creative students and the creative industry, and help them, provide them with the opportunities and platform to hone their skills, and also provide them with the opportunity to pursue it as a career? So like I said, in the empathize stage, it's more about recognizing who the stakeholders are, and it's quite it's quite certain that the stakeholders could be what I'm looking at would be students and parents. Students are your stakeholders, who might not have enough information about the industry, who want to pursue it. Parents who might be who are the decision makers at the end of it, they're skeptical about the industry. But only when you sit down as a counselor and think about your school and your environment, there might be another stakeholder involved. Your management of the school can be a stakeholder as well. For other students, it might be someone else who's a stakeholder. So it's very, very subjective and depends on who your stakeholders are. So in this step, let's define those stakeholders. So it could be the students and the parents. You then collectively seek to understand, collect data from them, which could be qualitative and quantitative. And at the end of it, when you look at a creative student, I think the biggest example that we had live was Leanne. She was very inquisitive about what's going around. They're very interested in arts. Places that you could probably start off is your art and music clubs, your sports clubs. If you have activities going around in your school, think about people who are actually participating in those activities. Those could be your creative students. Those could be your touch points to identify these creative students. And usually creative students also have, again, great examples. Leanne was a perfect example of a creative student who are facing that pressure from society, from maybe even their families, on not to pursue it, or being shunned down, that this is not something that you should pursue full time. You should focus on your study. So those are some of the characteristics of a creative student. Now, once we find out those stakeholders and identify touch points to speak with them, so with your students, it might be, like I said, clubs and societies. It could be social media platforms. You then look at the data you can collect, and this could be, like I said, quantitative or qualitative. Surveys could be a great way to collect data, or you could have focus group with both the stakeholders. Just get a couple of those creative students in a room, have an open-ended conversation with them, and see what are some of the problems they're facing, what are some of the issues that they're going through. And again, we have developed a couple of resources that you can immediately use after this in this stage as well. And incentivizing participation can be quite difficult. Not every student would want to fill out a survey. So simple thing that you could probably do is give out a gift voucher at the end of the survey. One person gets a chance to win it. And be very transparent with your students, because as Gen Z, we appreciate when people tell us why some things are being done. So tell them that, hey, we want to support you as a creative student, but in order to do that, we need your help, which is why we're asking these questions, which is why we want you to be a part of the survey and the focus groups and things like that. And make sure your focus group is fun. Don't make it too serious, because that's when students would open up in terms of what the problems that they're facing in. Now, once we've identified the stakeholders, you've collected your data, you need to start assessing it. What are their problems, needs, and challenges? Do you think in your school there aren't enough platforms for these creative students to express themselves? Do you think there's a lack of information that the students and the parents have? They're not understanding the industry enough. We have now provided you enough tools to address that challenge as well. What are some of the other? It could be quite different, and I'm not going to sit here and assume some of those problems. It will be very subjective to your students, the kind of environment that you come from. So once you've narrowed down those problems and challenges, figure out what are some of the challenges that's common to all of them and that you can solve. Maybe one of the common problems with everybody is that they don't have enough information about the industry, that both the parents and the students. Another problem could be that, hey, I am creative as a student, but there's no club or society for me to go and express it or learn more about it, or even understand that, hey, is it something that I would want to pursue as a career? Then you sit down and ideate. Now, this is how do we change this problem that we have? How do we drive real impact for these students and for our stakeholders? And like I said, it's very, very important to have collaboration in this. A lot of reasons why ideas fail is that they sit in silos and come up with solutions on their own. But it's quite important to collaborate with your stakeholders to come up with these solutions, but also create the right environment for it. And what I mean by that is, when you're collaborating, the stakeholders need to have their say. Gen Z loves talking, they love putting their points forward. So make sure it's an open environment. And obviously, as counselors, I don't need to tell you this, you are the experts at this field. And ideation always works best when it's a group setting, because I might give you a point A, and then point B could be brought up just because that person heard that point. So it's always bouncing off ideas, and it becomes quite productive that way. And creating the right environment. So when you get these students and parents in to have these conversations about ideation, it's really important to consider, how do you appeal to them? Who should be there, who shouldn't be there? Because a simple example could be, when you bring students together for their ideation session, maybe there might be a teacher that the shouldn't be there for that session, because of that teacher being present, they might be restrictive in some of the ideas that they put forward. And I know that sounds it's something that a lot of students face, that depending upon who's in the room, they might adjust their viewpoints, or what they say. So it's quite important to put them in the forefront when you do this, and create the right atmosphere. Gen Z likes things that are quite fun, so have some music, put some snacks, put some open environment out there, so they're more inclined to giving you the right kind of ideas, because at the end of it, you want to solve this problem. Then with your immediate solution, think about, how can you execute some of the solutions you come up with? Can we get speakers to inspire these students? Can we start a new club or a society? And for a lot of these things, SAE can definitely help you with it. They have a list of like inspiring people like Leanne. They have a lot of people who can come and speak to them. You can look at alumni that you can bring in who's done well in the industry. Some of the best practices when choosing speakers, if this is a solution, is that think about how you can make it relatable. Keep it short and simple. Can we look at industry experts? Gen Z doesn't like sitting through 1 or 2 hours of workshops. They hate it. So try and keep it as short and sweet as possible, and focus more on the stories aspect of it. As much as facts are important, I think the best way to convince or really hit it home with any audience is having a lot more of stories. So you saw that with Leanne as well. I think the facts that I showed with the creative industry are great and it's promising, but what would have definitely put it over the edge for all of you would be that hearing it from someone, actual story from someone who went through this would have been a lot more effective. And for clubs and societies, best practices are, you narrow down the objectives and outcomes. If you're starting a club and a society, what is it that you're starting it for? Do you have the resources and support to actually run this for a year or the next couple of years? And even the staff heading that club or society for the creative industry, are they right for the job? Because a lot of students might not take part in it just because they feel that the person heading it is not someone that they can relate to. So these are small things that you can keep in mind when thinking about this. If this is a solution, like I said, this is just what we would assume some of the common problems would be from all the workshops I've done, the schools that I've spoken to, the students that I've spoken to. This are some of the common problems we've seen, but it could be quite different to what you're facing as well. And it has to be student-led. Now, the reason why it has to be student-led is because this is when students would know that, is it something that they want to take up as a career? Because yeah, music production looks great, filmmaking looks great. They see, I don't know, Quentin Tarantino, they see all these big people doing really well, but they don't know the work that has to go in to actually make it in this industry. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. So the only way they'll realize it is if they actually have accountability and try to achieve this while they're in school. And then they will realize whether it's something that they want to pursue or not. And finally, test it. Test the solution that you come up with, launch it, get feedback from your students, and then continue the process. How can I now better the club or society that I've set up? Is the speaker that I brought in effective? Or whatever solution that you come up with for the problem that you have, has it worked, and get the feedback from the students, from the parents, have two-way conversations with them, really involve them in this whole design thinking process, because at the end of the day, that's how you will identify these students, continuously work with them so that the next batch of students can have it better, and then the next batch can have it even better than them. That's the whole point. It's constant improvement to ensure that we are successful the next couple of years. So that's been me talking quite a bit. We've seen, we've looked at how design thinking is. We've looked at the creative industry. We've heard from someone in the field. We've seen how we can use each of these stage in your from a very Gen Z perspective in your day-to-day aspect of a career counseling standpoint. But now Ajay is going to take over and run you through a little more in depth about what can be done. And I'm going to run it to him, and then after this, if time permits, we'll definitely have Q&A. But thank you so much for sitting through this, and over to you, Ajay. It's going to be sorry, I'm going to have Jan speak a few words before we get into Ajay as well.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Ajay. I just wanted to make sure that everybody also that I introduce Ajay. Dr. Ajay Shukla is a seasoned academic and somebody that have worked in the education industry for many, many years at a very high senior level. He currently runs an organization called EdOrbis, who counsels and assists students with placements in universities. But he has many, many years of experience. And as SAE, we are building our network of industry contacts through our advisory council, through the schools that we work with, in order to make sure that this creative industry is really getting the exposure that it needs, and that the students that are currently sitting within each of your schools get the opportunities with regards to pursuing that career. So Dr. Ajay is going to just take the conversation over the next half an hour a little bit further, show you some really practical things that you can also do with regards to counseling these students and guiding them, and then we will have some questions and answers at the end as well. We do have certificates that we will be distributing for each and every attendee as part of your professional development. So just keep that in mind, and then also, of course, that lucky draw for that short course that will be happening towards the end. So Dr. Ajay, over to you.
Thank you, Jan, for this very complimentary introduction, and also to Vishal and Leanne for an absolutely illuminating and engaging presentation earlier. Whenever I do a workshop like this, particularly because we are doing it virtually, I always ask myself, why should all of you listen to me? I think people listen to others who have an interesting perspective to offer, and they are interesting as people. So instead of jumping straight into a dry PPT, I will, talk beyond a little bit beyond my professional experience. I am a engineering graduate, 10 graduate, which is not a very light term these days, from Indian Institute of Technology, and I have been an alum of London Business School as well. But more, that's the dry aspect of describing myself. I do have other pursuits, and I was particularly intrigued by a quote that Vishal used earlier, that STEM and all these disciplines are important for sustaining life, but it's the art and culture that really make it worth living. And that's something, unconsciously I have imbibed in my own life story. And some of you may be surprised if I told you that, I'm a published Urdu and Hindi poet. I'm amongst the top 3 writers on a social resource called Quora on the subject. And that's in the world, by the way. And I'm a keen tennis player. I also ride a motorcycle for the past 25 years. I've been riding and I have scaled the highest motorable road in the world at 18,500 feet. And I am a classically trained, Indian classical trained musician, and I have my own music channel with subscribers and fans across 150 countries. So now I would ask all our educators in this meeting, do you think it's interesting? Would you like to listen to me? Okay, so generally a yes. Now this part of the presentation is going to shift gears dramatically from Gen Z to Gen A, as you can see how old I am. But there is a very interesting quote that old dogs can learn new tricks. So we can learn from Gen Z and all the experiences that Vishal shared earlier and actually apply it in a real situation. And I do believe that, if we have to make an impact in our very important work, which is helping guide students to fulfilling careers, we have to practice what we preach. So if we believe that design thinking is a great way to solve problems, then we should be applying it in our career counseling work. And Vishal said earlier that one of the first things as we get into a design thinking mindset is don't assume. And one of my professors in my B school, he said that, one of the worst situations that you can be in decision making is assume. Because if you break it down, it is ASS, you, me, means that you'll end up making an ass of yourself and someone else. So that's really the mindset with which we would like to approach this subject. And at this stage, I will share my screen. Are you all able to see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is what it is about. Consultative career coaching, and each word of that sentence is important, that we are career coaches. We are not just counselors. Consultative means that we are engaging with our stakeholders, which is students, parents, and teachers and administrators within the school. And how are we going to use design thinking principles to solve a very important problem? How do I identify and support creatively inspired students? Do we all believe that this is something
Ajay, you've
Ajay,
gone mute. Yeah.
Ajay, I think you've been muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me
Yes,
now?
we can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry about that. So why is your role critical? It's critical because you help students build fulfilling careers. And that's a serious responsibility. And when we look at the challenges related to the pandemic with restrictions on such a high-touch function as career coaching, I can pretty much empathize with everyone here on how difficult it has been. However, it has thrown many opportunities in terms of carrying on our work, and perhaps even more effectively and with greater impact using digital tools and other platforms that could still fulfill this particular goal that we have, which is to help students build fulfilling careers. So we must remind ourselves, what do we stand for in terms of our own personal values? And these are the 5 things that I came up with, which is impartiality. We always keep the student at the center of all that we do. Knowledge. We have to empower the students by tapping into the knowledge. And this is one of the sessions that is an embodiment of that aspect. Efficiency, that how do we link up the right students to the right institutions and point them to the right resources. Breadth, that we provide a spectrum of support, both in terms of understanding their aspirations and aptitudes and interests, but also in terms of choosing, preparing, and applying. So there's a long journey that we walk with our students. And value, that we actually give authentic and authoritative knowledge and information through a bunch of touch points which are personalized. They could be in workshops or seminars or online. So impartiality, knowledge, efficiency, breadth, and value. And these are things that we as educators must remind ourselves what we do in an everyday. Design thinking principles. You saw this earlier when Vishal was going through the 5 steps, which is empathy, then defining, ideating, prototyping, testing, and I have taken the creative liberty of rewording prototyping to planning and testing to action, and we'll see how this works in a counseling situation. How do we apply these principles in the situation? So really the first aspect, which is empathize, right? And listening and active listening is really a very, very important aspect. It is particularly acute and important to encourage, identify, and support design-inspired students. And this is probably the most important stage to make sure that. So how do we do this introductory conversation around empathy? So this can take place in a group or one-on-one. It's really designed to learn about their demographic, student, family, and a more personal motivation in terms of their ambitions and aptitude. And at this stage, forming an initial judgment, how serious, how able, how creatively inspired, how interesting and qualified is the student. And this is kind of a template you could use, which is putting together a core question around facts about the student, their plans, their studies, family. How do they spend their time outside of school? What is their English language proficiency, and the temperature check, that how are they feeling about their university transition? That's also important. I won't go through this long list because demographics are pretty much a checklist, a task list, and they should cover naturally an outline of an idea, what they want to achieve at the university level, what are their thoughts on career in terms of their ambitions and decision influences, and what is their current level of knowledge and time scale do they have? Are they in grade 10 and they have a longer runway, or are they in grade 12 and we need to do something fast with them? So this is a very important aspect of the initial conversation, which is putting together a fact base. And circling back to what Vishal said, that we need to gather all the information and actually make an informed judgment. Asking open-ended questions is actually a very, very important aspect of identifying creatively inspired students. And this is kind of a suggested inventory on what are good probing questions that will help you reveal and identify creatively inspired students. For example, what do you imagine yourself doing 10 years from now? Just close your eyes and imagine that. Provide additional probes. Do you see yourself as happy, busy, having fun? And that will tell you a little bit about what they imagine for themselves. And in between now and the 10 years is really the career journey. So it's a very deep question which provokes deep thought. It results in an original and deeply personal answer, not a general answer. And we have to practice active listening. So ratio 90 to 10. 90% of the time, the student should be speaking. What activities are you eager to do even on a bad day? And that tells you, are these creative pursuits? Are these scientific pursuits? Are they leisure pursuits? And that's going to tell a lot about the student. Gen Z also is actually inspired by public figures. So which public figure do you admire and why? So they may admire Elon Musk. They may be inspired by other young entrepreneurs like Vishal or Leanne. So what which public figure do you admire and why? And we must take careful notes on what they say. Also, we need to probe a little bit about the home situation. What do you wish your parents knew about you? What do you feel most worried about and what do you feel more confident about? That tells you about their anxieties and their confidence level about their own competencies and skills. So this is really the conversation which is important, which is the first introductory conversation, where we get to the background, the goals, and their own self-awareness. This can be done in a group or a one-on-one situation. It helps you form a judgment. And this is like a simple template that you could work with on each student. This is a checklist on what you could cover in the demographic aspect. And these are suggested list of questions that will help you identify the aspirations, motivations, and aptitude and attitudes of students, and then help you get to the next stage, which is the key task conversation. And this is where we are getting into defining and ideating. That, okay, what is their awareness level of the university journey? What is their preparation, academic or otherwise? Have they written a personal statement which is defining what they want to do and what they would like to do or what they would imagine themselves doing? And how does that relate to what their personal experiences in life so far have been? Are there any institutions or programs that they are very passionate about? Do they have a study plan and can we help them with that? Do they have a goal setting and can we help them with that? So this is really the second stage of the design thinking, which is definition and ideation. And this is where we evaluate resources. That should we do group workshops? Should we invite universities like SAE to hold webinars for certain groups of students? Should we have info sessions from an expert education counseling company like EdOrbis? And this is where you start spreading your network and options. Why this is important is that these touch points touch several students and sometimes families, and it establishes your credibility as a counselor that you can marshal resources outside the school, and it is quite cost effective as well. These also provide students and families for an open discussion, They are not designed to get into great detail, but it builds an awareness, sensitivity, knowledge, and urgency to get into planning their university career journey. So don't expect that, just one webinar attendance or one info session is going to turn all your students into self-motivated workers towards a university career journey. But it is very important to raise the awareness and urgency and knowledge to take their university journey to the next stage. And this is, for example, how we do it. So we have we bring a bunch of universities, and we typically do it by destination. I think some of you also put in the Q&A that Zara said that parents don't want to send students away for study abroad. So for those students, we get a bunch of universities, as you saw, Murdoch, American University in Dubai, Middlesex, UAU, SAE, and we get them together in a quick webinar setting, 20 minutes each. They do a Q&A, and then they can even make applications on the spot. So you can tap into the resources that EdOrbis offers, and they are free to attend for students, and counselors can guide their students towards these very important events. And we could do study abroad like we've done with Russell Group universities and some elite universities in America and Canada as well. Then there is the opportunity of, and how do we do this? Regularly in terms of destinations, as I just described, or around business like creative media, around programs like creative media. And you're not there to be just an expert on everything, and it's important that you leverage external resources, but you need to be a gifted facilitator to sustain an interesting conversation and get outside help as necessary. What's also important is that you should also make it an engaging format, like we've done today by giving some stories of real people and their careers in creative media space. So you should invite alumni as well to speak about their university experience. Choosing your university, now you don't have to take screenshots or go through this in detail, but this is a good template that you could give as an assignment to your students, where they can rate some of these factors in terms of importance and ranking, and start naming universities, worldwide reputation, the program performance, how does it do, what percentage of students are getting employed within 6 months, do they have club societies on campus that are compatible with my interests, are there modern accommodations, where is the campus located, do they have a social life, library, a good traditional versus a more funky or fun environment, labs. So all those things are very important in terms of a consideration criteria. It's not just the program. We must understand the students' motivations on a 360-degree basis. And this template will be available in the resource center, and it's free for you to use. So there are no secrets. This is a free resource. Then we talk about how do you develop a study plan? What motivates the student? What kind of a learner? What kind of strengths and weaknesses do they have? How do they cope with problems, delays, setbacks? And how clear are the students' goals? Are they confused? Are they very precise? I mean, I want to study medicine. There couldn't be nothing more precise than that. But do they know where do they want to study medicine and why? What career do they foresee if they choose that path? I think those are some of the probes that you need to use. And some of the techniques are, how do they work? How do they complete their tasks? Do they manage their time well? How do they prioritize? So it's making sure that we understand the students at a very deep level. And all we do we must keep the student at the center of our attention. The important thing as well is how do you make it engaging? Gen Z really likes a storytelling format. They are visual learners. They engage with people who are their age and not, old fogies like me. So are there any ideas you have on how we can engage the students and families around some of the touch points we discussed? You could pretty much put it in the chat box if you wish. Are there any ways that you would like to suggest on how we can engage people more? Yes, I see, getting more industry news. So if you are aware of what's happening in different industries, there is a lot of news that is coming around, new sectors that are being promoted by the UAE government or economy. Share that with students and parents so that they know what are the sunrise sectors and are they considering that as a part of their university journey. And finally, planning and action. And I always say that execution eats strategy for breakfast. So it's important to actually do something as opposed to just ideate. So here is where the rubber meets the road. And some plain truths. You can't hit a target you cannot see, and you cannot see a target that you don't have. So we have to have a well-defined target for each student. And many of you are familiar with SMART goals. SMART goals are vital. They should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So if we have set a goal for a student that I want to study audio in UAE, audio engineering in UAE, and I want to admit into an undergraduate program in September 2021, that's a specific goal that's time-bound. It's relevant because it's in line with the interest of the students. It's achievable because there is still time to aim for it. And it's measurable that if you get admission in your dream target set of universities for the audio program, it's achievable. So always create specific goals. And a good way to stimulate the students into thinking about goal setting is actually have them write something around a personal statement. What have you chosen to study and why? What do you think about your academic abilities and achievements? How are these abilities relevant to your application? I'm sorry about the grammar, I will correct it. What are your long-term aims and how would this program help support? Do you have any relevant work or project or club experience? And how is it relevant to the program that you are targeting? What are your interests in non-academic achievements? How are these relevant to your university and career planning? And what skills and experiences make you the right person for this course? So if you ask some areas of probes for a personal statement, that what do I want to be? These are some really good questions that you can provide as supplementary probes to encourage students into writing a personal statement. Never make it more than 1 page long. And that will make sure that students are getting more and more aligned towards a goal-setting journey and are, sensitive towards narrowing their search into a real actionable plan. So there are other resources that I have put together in the area of design thinking. So what have we learned today? We covered the 5 stages of a design thinking model. We reminded ourselves that we have a serious responsibility and we need to have a certain set of values and working practices to be effective counselors. Then we moved into the ideation phase, into the empathy phase, which is perhaps the most critical phase in terms of identifying creatively inclined and inspired students. We did an inventory of questions that are a best practice for identifying and supporting creatively inspired students. Then we moved into the key initial conversation, which is talking about getting demographic information and attitude, aptitude probes to understand the student more deeply, forming a judgment on what is right fit for the student. Then we moved into the key task, which is a checklist of things we must provide as support by way of engagement with alumni, creating study plans, engaging with universities, engaging with education counselors, engaging with events which are webinar or virtual open days, and providing all these resources in a targeted way to students. So that was the key task conversation, which covered the areas of ideation, definition, and then we moved to action and planning, which is testing and implementation, where we actually developed SMART goals. We also discussed an inventory of personal statement probes that you can provide to students and help them get more focused and more sensitive, more aware, more knowledgeable, and more motivated towards their education journey. So we did apply design principles, and this is where I would stop and open the floor for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Ajay. If there are any questions that anybody would like to pose, you are welcome to do that now, either in the chat or verbally. Any questions from anybody? Anything that you wanted to add or that we can clarify for you in any way? Before everybody starts leaving the meeting, I want to just also thank everybody for your attendance this morning. I want to thank Vishal and Dr. Ajay for the presentations that they've done and the information that they have shared with us. As I said in the beginning, of course, from an SAE point of view, this is a very important conversation, because our role within the UAE for the last 15 years as the global leader in the education field for creative media is to continue to make sure that our creatively inclined students are given the opportunities to follow a creative career. We do this a lot at your schools to support you in the processes, and if you need any support in any way, then you can contact us and we can let you know exactly how we can support you as well in that. We're drawing to the close of this session. We have also posted in the chat a link that you could please just fill in the form so that we have all of your correct details to put onto the certificates that we will then send out to you, your certificates of attendance. And of course, like I promised in the beginning, there is a lucky draw. to see which one of our school career counselors will get a free course from SAE. And also remember that any of your staff from your schools will qualify for a 20% discount. One staff member to qualify for a 20% discount for any course that they might want to do through SAE. So please, you are welcome to contact us for that. Chadni, I'm going to hand over to you, and you can maybe do the lucky draw.
Thank you everyone for attending as well. Jan, if you can mute yourself, please. Thank you. So as Jan said, let's do the lucky draw. I'm just going to share my screen. We're going to spin the wheel. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. So let's spin it. Awesome. It's Rawan. So is Rawan here?
Is Rawan still on the call?
Let me check. Yeah, she's here.
There's Rawan. Rawan, congratulations. You are the winner for today, and you can just be in contact with Chadni, and she will help you. And you are welcome to join any of our short courses at SAE. You can check our website and choose a course, and when the next intake is, you're welcome to join. Guys, I want to thank you all very, very much for your time today. Please stay in contact with us if you have any questions on how we can support you in making sure that your creative students are given the opportunities that they deserve. And it's been fantastic to see everybody on this webinar today. So we will also be offering more webinars, and those of you that might have some suggestions for us with regards to webinar topics that you would like us to address going forward, please just drop us a line on the chat as well and suggest your topics, and then we will put webinars together that would be more related to the kind of things that you want to talk about and you want to hear about. So we definitely would want to do that. So thank you so much. Please drop your suggestions in the chat. And so thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. I just want to share one more thing, is that tomorrow we're holding a Q&A session for students who are interested in exploring opportunities in the creative industries. So we will be sharing the information and the link so that you can send it to students. And I'm sure that this will be a helpful session for them.
Yeah. Yes, sorry, Christina, I forgot to mention that. It's actually happening tomorrow afternoon between 5:30 and 7, where we have a virtual open day question and answer session for any students that might be interested in the creative media space. So we will send that information out to you guys as well, and you can then share it with your students. Thank you for reminding us this morning.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. All the best. And those of you that are having spring break, enjoy the break. Hope you get some time to rest.
Thank you all for it's amazing. We have a lot of information. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.